Thanks to Baron of Dice, Grey Matter Gaming, and Monument Hobbies for sponsoring this video. Hi, I'm Campbell McLaughlin, galaxy-brained game understander and peak strategist, and today we're going to be talking about secret missions in the Pariah Nexus Tournament Companion for Warhammer 40,000. Your secret mission, should you choose to secret accept it, is to understand just what these are, how they work, and maybe, just maybe, how to use them to win a game or two. If you'd rather read your secret dossiers than listen to me yammer on about them, head on over to Goonhammer.com and gather that intelligence yourself. Link to that in the most secret of locations, the description below. What are secret missions? Secret missions are intended to be a catch-up mechanic. Under the right circumstances, they help a player who is lagging behind change direction and maybe eke out a win. Think of these less like Mario Kart's Blue Shell and more or less like a Hail Mary pass, a big attempt to turn things around when you're trailing by a manageable amount or you're in a situation where you have the resources to win but fell behind early. Here are the basics. At the end of Battle Round 3, starting with the player who had the second turn, if your primary VP is less than or equal to your opponent's, you can opt to do a secret mission. If you do, pick one of the secret mission cards and hold on to it face down. If you're in the Tabletop Battles app, you can secretly select one on the 4th Battle Round screen. Your VP from the primary mission is now capped at 40. You can no longer score primary VP in Battle Round 5. At the end of the battle, you reveal your secret mission, and if you achieved it, you score the listed VP. It's always 20. This means your primary scoring for the game is now capped at 40 and your max score at 90. When should you use it? So it's the bottom of turn 3, you open your handy Tabletop Battles app, and you can see that you're behind your opponent on primary score. Depending on what the field looks like, what assets are still available to you, and what your opponent's still got on the board, it might be time to bust out a secret mission. Maybe this game is one where your opponent held you to a low primary score early, but you tabled them. Or maybe you just have the ability to spread out across the table on the final turn, but that's only worth 15 VP, and you need more. Regardless of specifics, secret missions are there for when you're behind on points but have a resource advantage. But here's the thing. In competitive play, you aren't using secret missions to catch up. I mean, you might, but really you're using them for a specific game plan. Some armies are better than others at accomplishing secret missions, and almost all armies will have an easier time completing a secret mission going second, as the missions all complete at the end of the battle. This means that if you're going second, your opponent will not have any ability to react to your final turn and prevent you from achieving your mission. This makes missions like Unbroken Wall and Command Insertion much more powerful. A major part of accomplishing a secret mission is keeping your opponent guessing, and having the last move at the bottom of turn 5 gives you the best opportunity to do that. One thing to remember is that taking a secret mission doesn't stop you from scoring primary VP the regular way from the mission, it only caps your total primary score at 40 instead of 50. You can absolutely still score VP by doing the primary mission, though note that since the Q4 balance update, you now no longer score primary VP in the final battle round for the primary, only the secret mission. This prevents players from just dropping 30 or more victory points in the final round and makes them a bit less reliable. Even if your game plan includes a secret mission, you'll need to put in some work to score 20 primary victory points before round 5 if you want to max out your score. While we're on the topic, we should talk about the 4 secret missions you can choose from. Note that these are all completed at the end of the battle, regardless of whether you went first or second. Command Insertion. Have your warlord within range of one or more objective markers in your opponent's deployment zone and control that objective. This one isn't too hard to wrap your head around. Take your special little guy, put him in your opponent's house, and get 20 points at the end of the game. The more mobile and durable your warlord is, the better your chances are. Now there's a very real chance your opponent will see this coming depending on your army. If a normally backfield character like a Cadian Castellan or a Farseer is making a beeline for the other side of the table, your opponent is gonna know something's up. Unless your warlord has a decent objective control score or is palling around with a beefy unit, they also just might not be able to out-control your opponent on that objective. Naturally, you also need to make sure they get there in more or less one piece, and a squishy character on foot will have trouble going the distance. Any army that has a redeploy or uppy-downy ability on their warlord has a good shot at this, and speedy, hard-to-hit characters like Autarch Wayleapers are practically made for it. I found out while we were writing this that Wayleapers can move 34 inches in a single turn, and that just makes me so tired. Deep striking is also a common way to make this work. The Hypercrypt Legion, Demonic Incursion, and Angelic Host detachments all have ways to pick your warlord up and drop him just outside of 3 inches of any enemy models and onto your opponent's home objective. While Angron and an Imperial Knight with the Mysterious Guardian enhancement can return to the battlefield on an objective if your opponent can't screen him out. Demon Primarchs generally have an opportunity to do this if your opponent runs out of tools to kill them, and armies that can put their warlord into a Land Raider or Hecaton Land Fortress can also make a good run at this one. Shatter Cohesion. Your opponent has no units on the battlefield, or if they do, those units are either battle-shocked, below half strength, or more than 3 inches away from all objective markers. So I'm going to break presenter kayfabe for a moment here to let you know about something called the McLaughlin Special. This is an ancestral familial technique where I table my opponent and still somehow lose the game. This special mission is my own Enigma of Anigara Fault, a veritable hole made for me and my bowling ball playstyle. You need an aggressive army to make this work, and melee armies or mobile shooting armies will have an easier time than others. You've really got to kill the bejesus out of your opponent's army to pull this one off, as it's in your opponent's best interest to be both alive and on objectives. The hardest part of this will be if they have units that can hide on distant objectives, either out of reach of your combat units or untargetable with cover or lone operative. With indirect being all but toothless at time of writing, you can't rely on artillery to clear those units out and need to dig them out up close. This is really for those games where you go down in VP early but still table your opponent. This mission rewards armies that can clear units off objectives and out of terrain while also having either the board control or range to keep those objective markers covered. Armies that emphasize versatile killing power are great at this. Knights and Marines of both spiky and smooth varieties are as good at shooting as they are at chewing up stuff in melee, and can be both built to reward aggressive playstyles. This one is less about the army you play, though armies with a lot of damage output like Thousand Suns or Sisters of Battle can be alright at it, and more about the opponent's army, in situations where you go down early and have to counterpunch your way to success. Unbroken Wall. You control 3 or more objective markers not within your deployment zone. You have to control more of the table than not with this one, and you also need to keep enough of your army alive that you can score it at the end of the game. The main plays are to keep a few units safe so you can bust out at the 11th hour to grab this one, or keep your opponent so tied up that they can't stop you. If you're already in a position to hold a trio of objective markers outside of your deployment zone, you probably aren't in a situation where you need to take a secret mission. Once you've leapt through that mental hoop though, you need to consider how these units are going to hold those objectives and survive until the end of the game. Units on objectives are already going to be priorities for your opponent, so you've got to either cover so many objectives that your opponent can't possibly kill them all, have stuff on those objectives that are hard to kill, or defang your opponent's army completely. Just make sure that if you're holding units back for this, you're not sacrificing too much killing power on the front line. Also, if you're playing Scorched Earth, your opponent can just burn an objective or two and make this one actually impossible for you to achieve. This requires units that can get to those midfield objectives and weather a few turns of resistance, like heavier vehicles or units with a load of wounds and feel no pain saves. This also rewards having a late go turn, where you hold back the bulk of your force until late in the game. If your opponent only has a turn to clear your army off of half the board, you've got this one in the bag. If you can hem your opponent into their deployment zone like most jail lists do, you can also safely grab those objectives while your opponent chews through entirely too many wounds of dogs or cultists. It's also handy to keep a few cheap units in Deep Strike for late in the game, like Assault Intercessors with jump packs, Chaos Raptors, Drukhari Scourges, or Eldari Swooping Hawks. Note that with the Q4 balance changes, you'll need to weigh a 20 victory point final turn with the need to have a more aggressive primary score in turn 4. That being said, 20 victory points is still more than any primary mission in the game will allow you to score in the final turn now that Linchpin has changed. War of Attrition. One or more battle line units from your army is in your opponent's deployment zone, and they have no battle line units on the battlefield, or if they do, they're all within, not wholly within, their deployment zone. Getting your battle line dudes into your opponent's deployment zone is something you might already be doing if you play an aggressive army, or if you're just trying to cover the board. Your opponent also might not have any battle line units in their army to begin with, in which case they've already done half the work for you. This one is the most opponent dependent of the secret missions, and you'll typically know going into the game whether you should even be considering this one. Often this will be an option when your opponent has no or very few battle line units in their army, or if they have one they plan to hold back on their home objective. If your opponent is running a ton of battle line units, or has lots of renewable ones like Necrons or Genestealer cults, you're not likely to be able to accomplish this. You'll also need a good battle line unit of your own, and it'll need to be one that can actually make it into your opponent's deployment zone. Jail lists and other armies focused around trapping your opponent are in a good spot here, as you don't have to kill all of your opponent's battle line units, just keep them in the deployment zone. Of course, any army with sufficient uppy-downy rules like Hypercrypt Necrons can take advantage of this too, keeping a unit or two of warriors in relative safety until they drop them into your deployment zone late in the game. Grey Knight Terminators excel here, and Genestealer cults get around that need for durability by flooding the field in cheap battle line bodies. Naturally, some flavor of Eldar rear their pointy-eared heads here, as Sky Splinter Drukhari are already awash with loads of battle line units and transports. Rubric Marines can also manage this with a couple turns of double moving. Building for secret missions. Secret missions shouldn't just be thought of as a backup plan. For competitive players, they should be a regular tool in your arsenal, particularly in games where you're going second. To make that possible, some players may actually build their armies to take advantage of secret missions, and some factions already have a leg up. This usually boils down to being able to move quickly in the final turn of the game, or pull units off the table and place them back down, and ideally having those abilities on your Warlord and Battle Line units. Taking Battle Line units sets you up to both score War of Attrition and keep your opponent from doing the same. Battle Line units also tend to be on the cheaper side, making them great picks to hold back for Unbroken Wall. In a mission with the Hidden Supplies rule, you'll also have an extra objective to pick from, so if you see that in the tournament pack for an upcoming event, you can plan around it. For command insertion, you might want some way to deep strike or redeploy your warlord into enemy territory late in the game so they can stroll on up to those home objectives, and sufficiently fast transports can get them there too. Tips and tricks for playing with and against secret missions. Whether you build for them or not, knowing when to pick secret missions is the most important part of using them. Our data from the Tabletop Battles app shows that secret missions are chosen in fewer than 10% of games, but tend to have close to a 60% success rate when they're picked, typically leading to a 25 to 30% win rate when the player picking one succeeds. If you want to hit that sweet spot, you need to know when and how to pick them. Here are a few criteria. You're going second. Secret missions can absolutely work going first, but they're a lot easier going second. If you're going second, keep an eye out for the opportunity. You can't score 40 primary victory points any other way. Just because you can take a secret mission and complete it doesn't mean you should. Make sure you wouldn't just be better off holding objectives. Secret missions are pretty all or nothing now, and if you can just pull 15 on the final turn for take and hold, that'll usually mean you can pull more than 40. You have an easy pick. We covered the picks earlier, but if you're built for secret missions and you have an easy option, that's another green flag to look for. The mission is low scoring or your opponent won't hit 40 primary victory points. Some missions are lower scoring than others. Burden of Trust in particular tends to be low scoring, and if you're going second, the inability to defend in the final round makes it easier to just give up that scoring anyways. Supply Drop and Linchpin also tend to be lower scoring games for primary. If you can hold your opponent to fewer than 40 primary VP, secret missions become a lot more useful. The mission allows it. Supply Drop straight up makes Unbroken Wall impossible, and Scorched Earth can also be a no-go if your opponent can burn an objective early in the game. Likewise, the ritual can make it super trivial to score Unbroken Wall, but if you're making a mess of objectives on your own, you just might not need a secret mission to begin with. And look, if you're just getting blown out, feel free to take a secret mission anyways, just for shits and giggles. Nothing matters. God is dead. Hell is other gamers. On the other hand, if you're going up against a player on a secret mission of their own, you'll need to stay on your toes. Well, kind of. It'll usually be pretty clear what they're doing based on how the board looks at the bottom of turn 3. If their warlord is still alive, keep an eye out for command insertion. If that battle line unit is headed your way, move yours out of your deployment zone. If you're going up against an opponent with an army that's good at secret missions, you'll want to put some real thought into how you can secure an early advantage on primary VP that either puts you at more than 40 primary VP or doesn't leave you overstretched and unable to prevent a secret mission in the game's final turn. If you're coming into the bottom of the final battle round and you're sitting at 38 primary VP, you might be behind. Now that we're at the end, I can reveal my own secret mission, which was to understand just what the hell secret missions are. Hopefully, now you do too! If you liked this sort of Start Competing 101 content, why not let us know in the comments down below. Now if you really liked it, you can even support us on Patreon, where we've got even more stuff you can look at with your eyeballs, you beautiful prospective patron you. We'd also like to thank our sponsors for making our own secret missions achievable: Baron of Dice, Monument Hobbies, and Grey Matter Gaming. I've been Campbell McLaughlin, reminding you to keep it secret, keep it safe. Thanks for watching. really, you're using them for a specific game plan. Some armies are better than others at accomplishing secret missions, and almost all armies are piece of shit.